Well, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good ever what time of day it happens to be that you are listening to the Tattoo Teacher podcast. On this episode, I have the amazing Kerry Brown. Now, first time in a long time, I've got a local chatting with me, so we're on the same time zone. We don't have to worry about anything like that. It actually works. So, Kerry, welcome to the show. I'm just going to give you a just quick introduction. Now, I'm going to read this so I don't miss anything because you have done some amazing things. You are one of the most influential educators in 2025. You were on the Educator Hotlist in 2024, so a bit of promotion there. You are the Founding Director of Edtasker. You're an author. You're a curriculum writer. You're a Canva EduCreator and a Canvassador. I love Canva as well. You're a pedagogical coach, an innovator, and a critical friend. So we'll get into some of those. But Kerry, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Phil. It's good to be here.
How do you sleep?
You know what? When you're reading through that list of things, all it says to me is that she has undiagnosed ADHD, which is probably true.
Well, I'm probably on the same page, so.
Yeah, that's right. Obviously, not very well. No, actually, I sleep very well. I think I exhaust myself during the day, so I fall into an extremely deep sleep at night.
Yeah, well, looking at everything that you've done, like you obviously love education, but behind all of that, behind all of the accolades and achievements, there's a heart behind it. The why. Why did you get into education? So my first question is, what's your why? Why education?
And you know what? This is an interesting story, and it doesn't sound very good to start with, but I'd actually, when I finished university in Western Australia, I actually put down nursing as my first choice. And my auntie grabbed my submission form. She was at the table at the time and said, "What are you talking about? You're not a nurse, you're an educator." And she changed my preference. And being a 17-year-old girl who really wasn't 100% sure as to what she wanted to do, went, "Yeah, okay," and just went with it. Got in, and she clearly knew me very well because loved it from the beginning, loved the passion, loved the interactive and the interaction and the collaboration. And obviously, the more and more I got into it, I could see how it aligned with both my values, my need to work with young people to make a difference in the world and to make meaningful links to, learning. So I've never stepped far away from it, really. So she obviously knew me better than I did.
Yeah, we tend to have people in our lives that do that. They see things that often we can't. And like you did, you just gone, all right, okay, I'm going to trust you. You think that's right? I don't really care, so I'll go with it. So again, almost another accidental educator.
And that's exactly what I am. And but you know what? I've always been a bit of an adventurer. My motto to my children in life is kindness. I've got two. There's kindness first and try everything once.
Yep.
It's the whole idea of trying everything once. So I got in there and gave it a go, and clearly it's what suited me because that's where my passion lies, and it's built from there. And, it's not like I've ticked that box of trying everything once in education, because education is limitless and endless in terms of where you can take it and what you can do with it. So I'm still sitting in that place and exploring new parts of it, which is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. It is one of those, like we were just talking just before we press record, about where we've been in different schools, and about some schools create, they have the ability to create more opportunity for staff. So they tend to stay in one place longer, where otherwise, it's not that we get bored. It's just that I think we want that challenge. We want to be able to challenge ourselves so that we can challenge the kids in a better way.
Yeah, it's part of our personality, isn't it? We're creative teachers. We are. And so we love that ability to be able to pivot and to challenge ourselves and the kids in front of us. So yeah, we're constantly, I think, looking for that next step in where we can go and what we can do to achieve within this industry. And I think if we're somebody that kind of sits in that space for a very long period of time, we really need to reflect on why we're still sitting there, and maybe we don't still have that drive and that passion to extend and build and continue to learn. Because I feel, majority of educators don't get into education just to be administrators. They get in there to actually make a difference and to communicate and collaborate and stretch themselves into that stretch zone or learning pit or whatever you want to call it. That's just part of who we are. It's our DNA, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, like there's so many amazing educators that I've worked with and that I see online, and they're doing things, and they have education is it's a vocation rather than a job. They're not they're and I think those who do that are the long stayers. Unfortunately, a lot of these new start teachers, and they get beat up by the busy work that is piled on and on and on. But there are those teachers who not only love their day to day, but then they have other interests. And I know I've worked with international rugby referees. I've worked with Australian rugby coach, schoolboy rugby coaches. People who are heavily involved in community aspects. They take kids to they take students and community groups overseas to challenge and push. So it's not just what they do in the classroom, it's their greater sphere of life that then they bring back into the classroom to inspire and teach and show these young children what life can be.
And that's where I think, quite often we have these conversations around teachers struggling with the workload, etc. It's because it's not just about the curriculum that we're delivering, right? As teachers, we have big hearts and we really want to make a difference to the lives of the students that are in our care. So that sits outside of the written curriculum of what we have to cover in content. It sits with thinking about them 24/7, entering into their personal lives to see if we need to, in order to see that they feel safe and comfortable and to be able to learn effectively. That whole idea of teacher was wearing a million hats is so true. And like I said before, no one in their life has entered education because they've gone, you know what? I love to tick a box and I would love to write a few report cards. I just think that that's the jam and that's what I'm going to do. Nobody does that. And unfortunately, with the increase in administration, that's kind of the rabbit hole we found ourselves down. And what it's done is it's kind of swayed our focus away from that really meaningful connection with our students because we feel so, I suppose, directed to be able to, tick off these boxes and make sure that we've got everything crossed and ticked because of funding or whatever it might happen to be. And unfortunately, what that does is that then pulls away from the creativity in the classroom. It then has an impact on our joy for teaching. So there's this massive snowball effect in education at the moment. And unfortunately, as we try to kind of whittle down and work out where we're kind of have gone off track and what changes can we make to get ourselves back on track to invigorate lifelong learners, we're putting in more administration to try and work it out rather than stripping it back and going back to the simple idea of, developing really strong, rich relationships with students that, empowers them to ask real quality questions about the real world and problem solve. And so I think in some ways our undoing is our doing. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I'm currently going through this at the moment. Now, you mentioned funding and, administrative tasks. And look, there are some things that are extremely important that we need to do.
Absolutely.
And still annoying,
Yep.
and still time consuming. It still takes us away from sort of what we want to do. But then there's also the box ticking. And it's just like, we do this. We don't need to tick a box. We didn't have to, like years ago. Like I noticed a shift probably around 2010. Around that time, there was a real shift in the administrative workload that was put upon teachers across the board.
Yeah.
We used to be able to go into class. We used to be able to just pivot in a moment and absorb what the kids needed and move towards that to help them because we know our students. But now, you mentioned creativity. We've lost that ability to be creative in our own classrooms, to have that autonomy because we're so tired. Schools, we can't just blame, we can't go, oh, well, the principal says I've got to do this, because then they're told that they have to do, and then, it moves down. And so in general, everyone's lost that ability to be creative, to be flexible, to focus on what the students actually need in their classrooms at that time, and which we know every classroom is different.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It's about refinding that balance. And I really feel for our school administrators and principals at the moment because their hands are very tied with that as well. Um, it's interesting. I took a role in Malaysia for a couple of years, helping set up an early childhood centre for the Australian International School over in KL. And one of the things that I had to do was employ the local staff in Malaysia, train them up under the Australian curriculum. But we weren't restrained or confined by any of the rules and regulations that we have here in Australia. So whilst we were under that Australian umbrella, we never had, I suppose, the legislation in Malaysia to have to follow that. And it's really interesting what freedom that allowed us in terms of training the staff. Common sense prevailed. Of course, you didn't do activities with the students that were not, carefully thought out, safe for the environment, resourcing, etc. That was a really important part of it. But not having that kind of constraint and, I suppose rigidity around that flexibility and creativity helped us create a program that was really meaningful to the needs and interests of the students. And we went from a class of 16 kids the first year to having 85 kids the next year because the reputation of the school and the program that we ran and the learning that took place and the enjoyment and the engagement from these students went through the roof. And so that was and I'd been in education at that point for, 25 odd years, had seen the Australian curriculum come in, had seen those restraints and boundaries that administration and teachers were starting to have to focus more on rather than the quality teaching and learning and the setup and resourcing of those lessons. And then moving to that environment where I was given, obviously I had the knowledge of what was good practice, which is what it has done for me. The Australian system has done for me. It's obviously guided me and built me up to have that knowledge, which is really important. It's like that rigor and explicit learning at the beginning, right, of being a teacher. And then knowing where I could meld and mould that to make it more of a meaningful impact for these students, and the growth of the teachers in that particular environment as well. Leaning into a Regio and inquiry-based environment, they were just incredible, and it was a really proud moment. It was only a couple of years. I came back to Australia to pick up teaching again here, and I had seen, as you said, a massive shift in that period of time, just over a 2-year period, in the amount of administration that was taking place in schools. And again, not, finger pointing or anything. All of that has come about because people have the best intentions of trying to improve the system, right?
Yeah.
How can we do it? What can we do? How about we put this in place? Let's see if tracking this data will actually help us. All that really good intention. I think it's time to take pause in education. And, we talk about innovation doesn't mean adding more. Innovation can also mean taking out. Yeah. And I think that's something that we, possibly need to take pause on and look at, okay, let's look at what we need to strip away from this to create time and space for quality teaching and learning to take place in the classroom. So that's me on my bandwagon.
Oh, no, that's a common theme across, I think, definitely educators that I've spoken to, but also, the general feeling across this, like the curriculum is so loaded that we're supposed to try and fit all this stuff in, where we look at it and we go, there's no chance. Like we can give all the instruction, we can give all the information, but there's no knowledge and there's no learning. It's just an information overload.
Yeah.
And kids are just going, okay, well, what's next? What do I need to give you back so I can get to the next step? And it's really best to teach.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to really shoot myself in the foot here, or provoke some reaction to this. But
Excellent.
Let's do it. What our teachers are asked to assess and report on, the content and the skills of the Australian curriculum within the achievement standard, really drives, I suppose, the teaching and learning that takes place in the classroom, because that's what they are responsible for. Okay. Yet we talk all the time in education in those circles around how those lifelong skills, those soft skills, collaboration, communication, our cross-curricular priorities, our general capabilities, all those other bits of the Australian curriculum that we, really should be embedding into our learning to make sure that it's rich and meaningful for our students, our teachers to teach, we're not expected to assess and report on. So for me, I would love to flip our curriculum. Would love to flip our curriculum, especially with the introduction of AI. As you know, this content is really important for you to build an understanding of the world around you. But really what we're going to focus on teaching, assessing and reporting on is your ability to be able to work with others, to be able to think about, diversity in the cultures around you. And I think until we flip that focus of what is expected for teachers to administrate on, it's going to be very difficult to make that shift.
Yeah, I mean, thankfully I'm one of those amazing subjects where we are basically problem based learning or project based learning. We
Yeah.
have a task, we get in there, we in my classroom, it's a natural collaboration. It's a natural learning how to share, learning how to be patient, learning how to get along with others, and also being creative and learning how to fail. So all those skills, all those, I hate the term, but all those soft skills that we're trying to implement, I'm fortunate enough that they are a natural byproduct of the design technology, industrial technology area. But
Yeah.
then you think about a math classroom, it's harder. Like I talk to the math, science, English teachers, and they go, "We've just got so much curriculum we've got to get through. We don't have time to bring in the fun that math can be." And
Yeah.
you talk to the right math teacher, and they're going, "No, it's creative. We can do this, we can do that, and you look at this, and you bring in this." But they go, "We can't do that because we've got to do A, B, C, D."
Yeah. And I always talk about, the teachers always say, in that coaching space, they always say to me, we just need more time. We need more time to be able to be creative and sit down and remap and look at how we can integrate these subjects. When actually time's infinite, there's nothing we can do about that. It's very set in stone. What they're actually saying is they need space. Okay. And the space to do that. And so that can only happen if we obviously strip those things out. Like I said, that innovative approach of what's absolutely not necessary and what is it that's not necessary, and what can we take out to allow these teachers time to inject that love and creativity into the room. So, and I think the frustrating thing is, Phil, that this is common knowledge amongst all educators, and it's constantly talking about it. Yet, even though we seem to have come to this crescendo and this idea of this is what we need, we're still not making the shift in terms of the administrative or curriculum outlines that we're having to follow. And we're going down more of that road of direct, explicit teaching, which is taking away even more opportunity for creative and critical thinking. So, yeah, it's a messy, mucky, muddy world out there at the moment. And I hope that my biggest fear is that we're losing educators at a rapid rate.
Too quickly.
Too quickly, that hold that passion and understanding behind the importance of creative and critical thinking. And we need to move fast. We need to move fast to keep these teachers on board. Because as in education, everything comes in swings and roundabouts, and we will eventually find, hang on a minute, we need to actually refocus back on these integrated, inquiry-based, critical and creative thinking skills. What are we going to do in this space? And if we're not careful, we're going to have no one left sitting in that space because they are leaving very quickly.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, there's so much that we could just pull apart in just that brief statement there. That we're losing educators. We're overcrowded. We need to remove things. We need to give space, because space gives freedom. Freedom, lends to creativity. But where there's so much noise, and I mean, you see on the news, the unions are doing, and the media likes to unfortunately portray it as, okay, they just want more money. And I think most teachers, yes, they would never say no to more money. That's for sure. I'd be happy with a 5% pay rise or 10% pay rise, like the politicians get every year.
The wine budget.
But we will still continue to do our job. But what I think is lost in the noise is that they're saying, no, the teachers need things removed. They're overburdened. They're overwhelmed. They are burning out because they are trying to give so much and do so much. They're running out, and that's why and it's I think it's 3 to 5 years, 30-40% if not more, young, early, new start teachers are leaving.
Mm-hmm.
And how are we going to keep up? And
so here's the key things that I've been doing in the coaching that I've been doing with some schools in this space, because it's really lovely that in Queensland in particular, the NASAP have brought out the rules around, and they've really stripped back what teachers specifically in the primary year levels have to teach and have to assess and report on. So, traditionally prep was having to assess and report on all the KLAs plus some of the arts, etc. Now they're only having to report on maths and English, so they still have to teach the rest of the key learning areas. But in terms of reporting and assessing, it's only those two main streams, which I think, if it is a school-based decision in the independent sector as to whether they pick that up or not. And if they do, I think that makes a massive shift in the administration behind teaching these little people and spending more time in that quality space, developing all those skills we've been talking about. But in terms of the schools that are even in the state system that we've been talking to, the couple of small shifts that I try and get them to think about is the idea that we really moved away from teacher judgment and assessment, and we moved very much towards making sure that we had written quality summative assessment pieces that we could show the decision behind the grading that we're giving these teachers, and actually going back to a bit more of a balanced approach towards teachers are trained, they know what they're doing, let them make some educational judgments based on the conversations that they've had in the classroom, and not having to have everything as written-based assessments. I think that's alleviated in some of the schools that I work on. That's alleviated a lot of pressure, and it's allowing teachers to actually, I suppose, give themselves permission as well to be the experts in that classroom and to make those professional judgments when they know the classroom and they know the sequence of learning and what's expected for each of those levels. So that's one big thing to consider if the schools aren't doing it. The second thing is that integration, and I know that it takes a lot of time to integrate subjects, but, the IB school system has been doing this for years and looking at concept-based curriculum. And believe it or not, concepts are written all the way through our Australian curriculum, particularly in our humanities areas, and they make meaningful links to learning like you would not believe. So, and they're teaching the kids ideas, understanding perspective, getting them to understand what the meaning of community is, etc. And it's written into our curriculum. And if you focus on those concepts, suddenly you're able to integrate your assessments really easily as well. So it's looking at what you've already got there and just remapping it conceptually, which is game-changing, I think, too, in terms of just that engagement from both teachers and students. There was a class that I was working on that was teaching us all the subjects in silos in a high school setting. And then when we sat down and actually listened to each of the subject areas and what they were doing, we kind of unpacked that the concept behind everything they were doing was the idea of belonging. And be able to bring in that First Nations perspective across all subject areas, which we need to do anyway under our cross-curricular priorities. And suddenly we had this meaningful link. So I think that the idea of integration, schools think is too difficult because subject content is so difficult. But if you look at it from a concept perspective, it's really easy to integrate these subjects and then reduce the amount of assessment that you need to do in order to get an idea as to where the kids are with their understanding around it. So that's been huge. And the last thing that I would love to do, which I'm really seeing a lot in the primary schools, is that the Australian curriculum is written in adult academia language. So our Year 2 teachers, for example, are reading content descriptor and achievement standard, an elaboration on a rubric and trying to understand what it is that's being asked of them to teach and assess, across a 5-point scale, for example. And they're spending so much time trying to work that out. Whereas if we rewrote the Australian curriculum in child-centred language and age-appropriate language, every 30 seconds we save these teachers in time of having to interpret the meaning behind that, the better. So if we could rewrite our Australian curriculum in student-centred language that allowed teachers to go out exactly what that means in this context with this particular age group, suddenly we're saving tenfold amount of time. We can have I can statements for our students, allow the goal setting to happen more naturally. So they're my kind of little bandwagon things that those little shifts I'm trying to make in schools to go, yeah, this is what we've got. These are the issues that we're having. But actually there are things we can do to make a shift at the moment to try and alleviate some of that pressure and to bring that joy back into the classroom.
Yeah, it's just, and that's the thing, I mean, you hear all those, the professional sports coach, the best in the, they talk to their players. It's the 1%. It's the 1%. You turn up, you do your 1% every day, and that, that adds up. And it's the same with, like, what you just said and explained it in like child focused language. Like, immediately the teacher goes, okay, I don't have to think about that. So it takes that cognitive load off them straight away, which then reduces sort of the emotional load as well. So then they can go, oh, I've got all this energy that I can, yes, I'm saving time, and teachers want time, but they want time so they can reinvest back into their classroom in a creative way.
Yeah,
so people, I think there's a big misconception that teachers are going, we need more time, in the fact that people are going, well, you just want to not do as much work. It's like, no, we need more time so we can do the work that we want to do. We want to bring the stuff.
Work that matters, the work that really matters, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was just going to say, it's interesting you bring up the cognitive load, because the whole cognitive load theory and the impact on students is such a big thing at the moment. Yet we don't always practice what we preach. So we're preaching that cognitive load from a student perspective, but we're not looking at it from an educator perspective.
No, because, well, we just keep doing what we do, and we think then we're told what to do, and then we got to tick the box so that, and the school's going, yeah, you got to make sure you do that because we need the money for this student, and we need this, and if you don't get that, we need, and all of a sudden the poor teacher's copying this. Okay, I've got to do all this sort of stuff, and then taking on that like the emotional burden of what they want, and then you mentioned it earlier, these teachers, and like you and I, we got in there to build relationship with these young human beings, these people that we want to help become valued and productive members of society. And unfortunately, they get lost because we are getting bogged down in the reads, and so they go, well, if they can't do it, why should I bother? They're stressed, I'll be stressed, and we'll throw it out the window. And we know, and as well, that technology, entrepreneurship, the way people can create jobs out of nothing, they can create income streams out of nothing. And these, there's 13, 14, 15-year-old students, children, as they, often referred to, which they are technically their children, but they have got these ideas and skills and they just run with it. And then they turn up into a classroom and they're told, no, you have to think like this and you have to do it this way and you have to do that. And they go, that just doesn't compute, because if I do it my way, or if you allow me the freedom, I can come up with some amazing things.
Yeah, it's that, and there's some great companies out there at the moment doing some wonderful stuff. I mean, Nicole Dyson with Future Anything is doing some wonderful work in that space with entrepreneurialism. One of the schools that I'm coaching at down on the Gold Coast is, really thinks outside the box every year. They make these massive shifts, and they've got a school that, the kids jump on the bus every morning. They go down to Coolangatta to the beach in Currumbin, and they learn from down there. And they come back, so it's that real outdoor learning. They've got a virtual learning community, so those students with high anxiety do a lot of online learning, but they come in for major events, assemblies, incursions, that kind of thing. So they've got that real hybrid, flexible model. They've just started a new unit where kids get to choose a little bit more about what hours they're going to be at school based around their parents' work shifts. So, and I think this is the kind of modelling that we need to see in that flexible thinking of the world is changing. And thinking forward about what can we do to actually support, because we still need people to love learning, right?
And schools aren't going away. Like,
no,
we need schools, because we know what it's like when we quickly duck out of the classroom to grab our water bottle or the book that we forgot for the class, and we leave 25 young people together.
Yeah.
It turns to chaos pretty quickly. And you can't. But they need to learn, and they need to get the knowledge and the skills that adults can bring. Like we aren't the font of all knowledge anymore. They can find out far more in 5 minutes and we can give them in 30.
Absolutely.
But our role is to teach them how to be people, but how to put that knowledge or that information into application. And then that's where knowledge and learning and wisdom comes about, rather than
So, and you're right, Phil, it's about leaning in, right? Leaning into the kids. So you mentioned before noise. And I think that the whole noise around teachers and educators at the moment and that cognitive load is it then affects our ability to think creatively around how we're going to present information and learning to our students. That whole 6-7
Oh, yeah.
that was going on around schools. And I went to a school to do writing workshops around my books. And it was a school up in Brisbane, a high school, year 9 students. And one of the teachers on the way towards setting me up in the classroom had said to me that the 6-7 phase was driving them absolutely nuts to the point where they were ready to ban it and, start almost penalising kids for using it in the classroom. I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting because I've only got an hour with these year 9 students and I supposedly in that hour I meant to invigorate a love for books and writing and, solve all the problems in the literature world in that period of time. And I thought, okay, how am I going to do this? So I walked into the room and just wrote 6-7 on the board. And they all kind of gasped because they get told off for it so much. And I said, okay, tell me what this means. And none of them could tell me. They said it's like a basketball meme. And I'm like, yeah, but clearly if you're saying it all the time and it has such an impact on you, it must mean something. Like, what does it mean? And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, so for the purpose of this session, I want you to give it a meaning. But it has to have an educational context. So you've got, 5 minutes, chat to your mates next to you and come up with something that's convincing as to what 6-7 means. And I reckon it took less than a minute and a kid, year 9 student boy at the back of the class put his hand up and he said, 6-7, the word making has got 6 letters. The word meaning has got 7 letters, making meaning behind this thing. He said, add them together and it equals 13. And he said, and the 13th letter of the alphabet is the letter M. And if you turn that sideways, that's the sigma symbol for maths in maths. And I was like, mind blowing. So, you tap into these kids with something that's really cool for them and you manipulate it into an educational context and suddenly you've got them. Never came up again the next hour. And it was enough of a spin-off for them that they came up with some really fantastic creative ideas in creative writing and we had a fantastic session. It was really cool. So I think leaning into what's going on at the moment with these students is really important. And that goes specifically around the whole idea, I think, of AI and using AI in the classroom. Not shying away from it, but leaning into it in a safe way, obviously.
Yeah, and even just talking about it, I've been fortunate enough to work in some amazing schools. The school you mentioned that has all these various programs. I had the opportunity to work there for a while, and they're one of the executives. He was just like, it's all about flailing, and it's just like just fail forward. We go, hey, can we try this? He goes, why not? As long as you learn from it. Doesn't have to work, but as long as you learn, as long as the kids learn. And so there was a fair bit of freedom and flexibility, and you're allowed autonomy in your classroom. As long we still had to do our job, but how the journey from getting from A to B, that was all on us. We started here and we finished here. What we did in the middle and how we got our students to that position. Yeah, that was on us. And even if it didn't work, even if the project completely floundered, which, one or two of them did for me.
Yeah.
But it gave me the opportunity to go, okay, well, how can I make that better next time? Do I just need to throw it out altogether? Or is it a battle worth fighting because it's got the concept behind it is going to be valuable?
Yeah. And I think the pivotal point there is that you communicate that process with the students and you go, we gave this a go. This is what worked really well, plus minuses, interesting, PMI charts, whatever it is, and just be really transparent with the students. And then you've got the perfect modelling going on for these students about flailing which I've heard that term as well at that school. So yeah, it's no, definitely, it's nice to know that there's school out there that are willing to kind of push the status quo a little bit and see where they end up. And I think that's what these kids need, because they're going to have to push the status quo and the difference when they get out of school as well, especially with the introduction of AI. Jobs are going to transform exponentially, and it's going to be these students that we have now that are going to be part of that transformation. So they need to know that flailing,
Flail, yeah.
learning, failing to learn.
Yeah, flailing was another one that another teacher told me about. So it was just that, failing learning.
Flirting is safe, right?
Yeah, and that's how I guess that's what I always try and explain to my students. Hey, it's okay if it doesn't work. Disappointing because you want what your idea up here and it doesn't translate. But it's okay if it doesn't, because you've gained skills, you've gained and you have learnt, irregardless. Like, failure is not a bad thing. Failure is not a negative word. To succeed, you have to fail first.
I think our educators are, unfortunately, because of the workload at the moment, not all of them. I'm not going to put everyone in the one basket, but it is becoming common that they're a little risk adverse, because I suppose being scared of the workload that will ensue because of that.
Yeah, and see,
I get that.
Yeah, and I naturally sort of lean into that sort of attitude as well, because it comes down to a whole range of things, but I don't like rules, because rules can they're important, don't get me wrong, but sometimes they constrain too much, so they stop that moving forward. Yes, we need rules, without a doubt, because the world would be in chaos otherwise. But with sometimes like that's, and the kids go, well, that's just stupid, and I was like, well, yeah, it is, but it's part of
what it is.
That is what it is. But let's work within it. Let's push it. Let's see, how do we work within the confines of this? How can we come up with some creativity to for a workaround?
Yeah, and I suppose the perfect example of that is that set up in Malaysia, right? Is that an awareness of the rules that were in place when I was working in Australia, and the reasoning behind them being here, and then having them removed in another country, and the freedom that provided to be creative in that space. But however, I also get it, because like you said, even with you doing design technologies, you need rules for safety reasons as well. Yeah. So it was making those, executive decisions around which ones were really important in the context. And I think that's probably a big thing here, is that everybody's context is different. And when we've got these blanket rules of what we must cover and when we must cover it, that a curriculum that doesn't necessarily take into account the context of the school where it's at, the clientele that they're teaching and the needs of those students, then that can have an impact. And you would be seeing that benefit in where you're currently teaching at the moment. You've got working with students with higher needs. They strip back the amount of curriculum and they really focus on those social skills and those important skills that build them as a person to be able to be successful outside of school and that structure. You would be seeing the benefit of that as well.
Yeah. The opportunities that are provided for these students are amazing. Like, we had our first year 12 graduate last year. And, at the end of, they had the valedictory, assembly, and they put all their achievements, and these 3 or 4 students, they had at least three certificates to their name before they finished, before they turned 18.
Diplomas and
like certificate 2, certificate 3 in various things, and we're just allowing these students to try and then to follow some of their passions and help them move into the vocation that they want to do and see where it's at. So and
those vocational studies is something that I think we're doing really well at the moment, is allowing students to work in both those areas, wanting to actually receive their ATAR score at the end of year 12, but also get certificates in certain areas and training. I think that's something we're doing well, really well.
Yeah, I mean, I know if I look back to when I was in high school, if we had these opportunities now, I think I'm pretty sure that my life would be very different in how I achieved my goals, along with all my buddies as well. Because we didn't want to be at school; we wanted to do stuff. We wanted to get out there, make and build and create, and we didn't like the classroom. And unfortunately, at the time, that's what it was. And it was that shift as well, where people were going, well, no, we can't take 15-year-olds anymore. We need to wait till they're 17 or 18. But the vocation, like, I mean, you look at the success of all these vocational schools popping up, especially they're all up and down the East Coast. Queensland is just, the busy schools. AITC, which has now changed its name again. Even Arcadia College, I think it is, who have the alternative pathways for kids who hate school, and there's so many of these training centres that are just doing amazing things for students and helping them get to their level of success, whatever that may be.
It's really funny, as you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking too, I was having a thought the other day around, someone asked me who it was or what it was that gave me the skills and inspiration to become an author. And I really had to sit and think about it because I couldn't really kind of trace it back. But I had, because if you look at my report cards going through high school, was not an A-grade English student by any means. If anything, my reports were like, Kerry should talk less and listen more, kind of, energy behind it. But I had a teacher in Year 9 who made us keep a personal diary. And at that time, my father had passed away. And so I was using that diary as a bit of self, I suppose, healing, counselling, whatever it was. And the whole idea behind this diary that she got us to write, it was never graded. It was nothing to do directly with what she was having to cover. She would always read them and just give me positive feedback, regardless of what I wrote in there. She would never correct it. She just wrote it. So she gave me, I think, permission to just be who I wanted to be in that diary. And I've kept it. And it's really interesting when I look back into the old-fashioned diary covering the magazine pages and stuff. But I've still got it there. So it clearly meant a lot to me. And I think that when I started writing picture books, I did it because I'd gone on maternity leave with my son and needed something cognitive to keep me going, and started to be picked up by publishing companies, etc. And somebody said to me at the time, have you thought about going and doing a creative writing course at university around this? And I have never wanted to, and I've never been able to pinpoint why, but something you just said then has kind of made me realize it's because if it gave me too much structure and too many rules around how a creative piece should be written, I will lose my creative edge to writing. So just talking about all of this and curriculum and what we, giving the kids these structures and rules about what we think they need to know, I think sometimes we're probably causing ourselves more difficulties than we need to. Sometimes we just need to give them that basic understanding, empowerment, positive feedback that you can do this to flail, to give it a go. And once they have that passion, will take it to where they need to. None of what I really had back there in terms of this is how you must write and this is the feedback we're giving you, I think led to why I write now. I think it was more about the impact from the teacher and the fact that I didn't delve too much into the boundaries and the rules that were expected around what a good quality piece of writing looked like.
Yeah, it's amazing how we've probably all got at least one teacher who had that impact on our lives. That regardless if you're in education or not, you'll think back to your either primary school or high school days and just go, oh, I remember. Yeah, and I've got a number of teachers who, I was a rat bag kid, and my report cards,
said the same,
if not worse. But they corrected me and disciplined me when I needed it. But they also allowed me to be who I was. And so, I look back at that and I go, yeah, okay, yeah, I was horrible, but they were They were gracious, and they were kind and very forgiving. But it's also, I can look back with fondness. And now that teacher for you has given you that spark to become an author, become that creative. So, you English, literature, creative writing, storybooks, and then your other part that we talked about was that you're making stuff with Canva, and people go, hold on, if you're doing Canva stuff, that's not English literature. That's like design and technology or digital technology or arts. Like, how was it a natural progression into Canva? And obviously, you're doing a lot to be, an ambassador for them as well. But how did that come into your teaching area?
So I had been given asked to step into a role at a school that I was working at as head of literacy and innovation. And so it was about really, and the principal's fantastic, and the main emphasis behind this role was really just trying to increase kids' love of literature, right, whether it be reading or writing. And obviously with digital technologies, the way that it was going and the introduction of some pretty cool applications, it made sense that you'd have to try and marry the two in order to keep up the engagement with the students as well. I had a very good friend who was one of the original creators in Canva who saw what I was doing and said, you should really get in and start adding some templating and design into Canva to help teachers. So I kind of got in as an EduCreator, it was about 5 years ago, creating templates aligned to the curriculum for Australian and American teachers. And then from there, just have continued to work with them. I'm working on a project at the moment with them, which is trying to take resources from overseas and localise them to the Australian curriculum and finding where they fit so that we have this resourcing there for teachers. But I think what I really loved about Canva is that it gave teachers the autonomy to apply what they wanted to teach in a really creative space that was easy to use. So, traditionally we've been trying to use, whether it be Publisher or whatever, which was all very clunky and clunky and time consuming. Canva was just so easy. It felt like it just opened up this creative space for educators and also the students. Like you give them 10 minutes on Canva and they work the whole thing out. And as it started to evolve, the things that you can do in there now that allow, cross-classroom collaborations, on their whiteboards and being able to have open chats and things like that. I think that, and now they've got integrated some of their AI and their magic activities, which is basically embedding thinking routines, which is really good pedagogy for me. I'm a massive fan of Project Zero and Ron Richards' thinking routines and giving kids some structure to be creative in their thinking. But allowing them to, be really generous with their thought as well and make those connections. So I feel like Canva iterates very quickly. It's on top of what's happening around the world. It's listening to its educators. And one of the things that with the magic activities is I invited the guy that created that into the classroom and actually watched it in action with a group of kids. And he sat there and took notes about, the end user and what the kids were doing with this and what they were frustrated with. And he integrated these. He took notes from all these students and then took it back to Canva and reiterated the program based on the user end. So that whole embedment behind their purpose and their values around doing good and, really wanting to just be good humans and do good things. They walk it, they talk it. And, I think the other thing is there it's free for educators around the whole world. There's no cost involved. So it's just a phenomenal platform. And, I think I use it in everything I do now. I work for companies and write units of work, and every template or resource I create that links through to that unit of work is now created on Canva because it is so timeless and interesting and engaging for those students and easy to use. So now I really do sound like a Canvassador, don't I?
Absolutely.
Go and get shares in them. I love working with them. They're good people.
Yeah, and that, like what you just said with that developer coming into the classroom and going, hey, and watching how the users use it and getting feedback from that is so critical. I mean, we know so many teachers have been burnt by ed tech companies because the product is made for the buyer. Like I heard this on, I think it was AI and Education podcast with Dan Bowen.
Okay.
One of them said these things are made for the buyer, not the user,
Mm-hmm.
and they need to shift. And it was really interesting to think, well, that's true. Like edtech companies are there just to sell a product, and look, hey, it's a business, and it's there's been some great products. Don't get me wrong, but there's also been a lot of a lot of glitter on things that shouldn't have glitter on it.
Yeah, and I think because they have made a pact, Mel and Cliff, who are the founders of Canva, that Canva will be free for educators around the world, has a huge impact because it strips away all of that possible marketing business buy-in that we're wary of, right? When we buy into an educational app or product in a school, because there's not a one size that fits all in these teachers, with what we put into classrooms as well. But I think the diversity behind what Canva does and the fact that it is free, and they're also about, it's not just free, they're also about thinking about accessibility, how do we get this product out to students and teachers who might not necessarily have the money to be able to purchase the laptops in their classroom to be able to run a Canva app. So it's really looking at I suppose, the socioeconomic status of schools as well, and really empowering schools to have access to current digital applications so that they can be successful in life as well, because that's where we're going. So it's the values that embed Canva, I think, that are so powerful, and really fortunate to be doing some work with them. And the other thing is they offer free professional development for teachers as well. If you don't know how to use it, they will upskill for free as well. So very, very,
and
very
there's the equity that is needed in education, because there are so many there's so much software, programs, applications, hardware, that there are schools and students and teachers that they just can't they can't get access to it through a whole range of reasons. But at least with Canva, if you've got access to a computer, it doesn't need to be a high-powered one. As long as you can turn it on, you have a reasonable internet connection.
Yeah, you've got some accessibility there.
You can get to it. So with all these things that we've been discussing, from, you're helping start a school in Kuala Lumpur, being an author, you're a coach, which we're definitely not going to, we could probably talk for another couple of hours. But, you talk about coaching in schools, and you're doing your Canva and all these things. Is these the nominations and the accolades, which I know I've spoken to other teachers who have them, they sort of almost shy away from those accolades. But what was the journey? Was it just I don't even know why I'm actually on this list. I'm just doing what I love to do.
100%.
And were I guess your other nominees and other awardees, were they sort of along the same path?
I think that as teachers, none of us like that. We don't get in, just like we don't get into teaching for administration, we don't get into for awards. We like to give awards to kids, step into the background, I suppose. And it all kind of came about, I think, when I stepped out of working in one particular school system and started, and the reason that I did that is obviously I had my finger in a million different pies, and I really wanted to see if I could have a wider impact rather than just in one particular school, but actually have an impact across the school. And whilst students are the crux of why we teach, I've really shifted into that space of my focus is on our educators now. Because it trickles down from the top. And if our educators don't feel safe and supported and joyous in what they're doing, we're not going to keep them, which we're already seeing. And that'll feed down, obviously, to impact the students underneath it. So my focus has definitely shifted from the students to the teacher based. And I suppose as I started Edtasker and started to, I suppose, communicate my thoughts around that through LinkedIn and social media and some of the work that I was doing with some learning management systems and and other educational online providers. I suppose that networking kind of got my name out there a little bit. So I'm really appreciative of the nomination, but it's, I think that there are many other people out there in the educational industry with just as much, if not more heart than me, that deserve to be recognised for the work that they're doing on the ground with the students. I think I had the advantage because of the work that I've stepped into and doing that networking. My name has gotten out there, but there's names that aren't out there that deserve it probably more, if that all makes sense.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And it's one of those things where it's you're doing it for the joy of teaching and learning and educating both the student and the teacher. And I guess like you're saying, your focus has sort of shifted to the educator now rather than the student. And I think I'm sort of, some of those thoughts are into what I'm thinking now. It's like, how can I help the next generation of teachers stay in teaching as long as I have? It's an industry that I never thought I'd stay in. Like when I actually did I'm a toolmaker by trade. I then went and did a design degree followed by the education degree, because I go, if I don't like teaching, if I just do a 3-year education degree and then I don't like it, I'm not going to be happy. So I'm going to do something that, well, one, that I enjoy and I love being creative, and it sort of feeds on what I've been doing, and I can bring my experience in. But then if education is just rubbish and I go, nah, I'm not cut out for being a teacher, at least I've got something that I can go, oh, hold on, I'm going back to this. But now I'm 24 years into education. Going,
I thought you were going to tell me you're 24 years old then.
Oh God, no, I'm no, definitely not. I look back and well, look, one of my I've got kids who say, "Oh, how old are you? Oh, you're only 23. Yeah, well, you get the A, so I'll go with that one." But yeah, like that focus has shifted to go, okay, how can we help these young teachers stay in a career that we have got so much joy and heartache, but we see we don't always see the fruit of the seeds we plant.
No.
But we know it's out there, because occasionally we just get that glimpse. We run into a student, who's graduated, and I had the fortunate chance to actually do that just recently at a wedding in Sydney. Like, we went down to Sydney for a wedding, and I ran into an old student. He goes, "Oh, you look familiar," and we ended up chatting, and then he was one of the boys at year 7, this scared little boy, and I helped him through the first little part of his high school career. And did I think I did part of it? It's like, well, I was just doing my job and just investing into these children. So I want to be able to.
There's those little Easter eggs that come back that keep you in it too, right? That positive feedback, and know that you're having that in. And you know what? It's exactly the same, Phil, with working with the teachers and the adults. They have these aha moments where, they see the silver lining behind what they're doing, and it makes it all really purposeful and meaningful to go on. But I suppose I have a new focus this year. So when I first started with Edtasker, it happened because I'd had a pretty bad car accident, hit by a drunk driver, just needed to take some time out from being at the school as well. And like I said, I wanted to have that wider impact. So I was trying to combine all these different things I was doing and see how I could help. And so we've kind of been dabbling in multiple areas. But as I've been doing it over the last couple of years, it started to narrow down, and I'm starting to really, I think, pinpoint where I really want to hit the target. And for me, moving forward into this year, it's really about bringing joy and creativity back into the classroom. For me, that is where I want to sit with everything that's going on, and work with schools and teachers to be able to go, you know what, this is not impossible. There are some things that we can do here that are going to make a massive impact on the time that you're putting into your planning and your teaching, and creating lessons that are really joyful and creative for both the teacher and the learner. And that's where I'm kind of sitting at the moment with that. So I feel like I've got that invigoration that I had when I first started teaching.
That's awesome. It's that's the second act of your education
career. there's some cool stuff that we could be doing here, and it's just a matter of taking the bull by the horns and taking, like you said, a few risks, and shaking things up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to do it because we're going to keep losing teachers and we're going to keep losing learners as well with a joy for learning, right? We've got to do something. So that's kind of where my headway and my highway is this year. See where it goes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, on that, you talk about you've mentioned Edtasker, which we've I guess only just glazed across. That it's another thing that you're doing, but and I know your time is precious, and you've got a family as well, and you've got your job and your work, and we both have to get up tomorrow morning and go to school. But if people want to find out more about these things, now we connected on LinkedIn. But if people wanted to find more about what you do with Edtasker, about your books, about your coaching, even with Canva, how that all works. What are some of the ways, and I'll put links in the show notes, but what are some of the ways that people can get in contact with you?
So LinkedIn is probably my foremost kind of contact at the moment. I do have a website, it's edtasker.com.au, but I'm about to go in and revamp that because it's a bit bigger than Ben-Hur. It was all my ideas all at once, and now that I've got a bit more of a headway and focus, I'm going to go through and revamp all that. But within that website, I do have links to the books that I've written, companies that I've written units of work with, my Canva creator account, which is called Innovation Station. It has a link to that and all the resources that are in there. So if you just wanted a general brief, you could go to the website. But if you wanted to have a chat, LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach out to me, or admin@edtasker.com.au if they wanted to send an email through. I'm always up for it. I'm never short for a word, Phil. I'm always up for a good chat.
Oh, excellent. Well, you're an English lit teacher, so of course you are.
Too many words. That's the report card.
Yeah. I mean, I got, has potential, needs to shut up and pay attention. But, it was said a little bit nicer. But also, they were in the days where basically you could write that sort of stuff and parents would go, yes, shut your mouth and get on with your work.
Not anymore.
But now, look, Kerry, I want to thank you for your time. But look, it wouldn't be the Tattoo Teacher podcast if I didn't ask you, do you have any tattoos?
I do.
Excellent.
I do. Funny story behind it, though. It's I was 19 and I went out to visit a friend in Broome and just thought, let's get a tattoo. And I got a hummingbird on my hip and she got a dolphin. And then we've gone and, had children and gone through perimenopause and marriage and all the rest of it and put on a ton of weight. And now mine's called a fat pigeon and hers is a whale. So it expanded slightly from where it was at.
Well, look, they all change. But hey, look, what else do you do in Broome?
Exactly. So it's morphed and emerged into its own, character as time's gone on.
Well, I'm
about it.
Hey, you could write a book about it. How
let the pigeon drive the bus.
Yeah, and well, I'm glad you do. I'm glad you do because like the last slew of guests, they've tipped the scale. The first couple, like the first lot of guests that I had, everyone had a tattoo, just about,
right.
And then all of a sudden it was just this dry spell. I'm going, what's going on here?
Really?
Yeah. So, but look, hey, each to their own. I all my tattoos tell a story, and it's part of my way of breaking the rules and breaking the norms of what a teacher is, and trying to bring joy to the world that we work in.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. We'll have to have a coffee one day and go through the stories.
Oh, definitely. Well, I mean, we work just around the corner from each other now, so it's a small world, this education world.
It is, far too small.
But Kerry, thank you so much for your time and for all that you're doing, not only in the past with all your students and still to a certain extent with students, but also now how you're reinvesting into the educators.
Oh, look, they're the most important people I think we have on the ground with our young people. They really are. And I don't think that there's enough awareness probably out there around how much educators carry on their shoulders with the students in their care and how much they care. So anything we can do to support them and make their job a little bit more joyous and easier is going to be my real focus moving forward. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to watching and hearing about the journey of the focus and how it pans out over this year especially.
Thanks, Phil. It's been lovely chatting with you.
And you have a wonderful evening, and we'll catch up real soon.
Thanks. Sounds good, mate. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to the Tattoo Teacher podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and found it insightful. If you like what you heard, it would mean so much to me if you could either like, follow, and subscribe to whatever platform you are listening on. The music was by DJ Fruit Salad. Thanks again for listening. Stay cool. Be blessed.